What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. Sunday AM Coffee, continuing our position by position breakdown of the current New York Jets roster. We've talked about Garrett Wilson, talked about Breece Hall. Today, we're going to do about 15 minutes or so on the current state of the offensive line. Next week, we'll probably talk defensive line, and we'll continue to roll through the positions on the roster before the league year opens. Before we get into it, I have to remind you guys that as January comes to a close, it is a good time to think about your mental wealth. Getting enough energy, getting enough rest. You know, here at Badlands, we're a big fan and big believers in Magic Mind. They have a terrific sort of joint offer pack right now where you have the mental fitness shot in the morning, you have the little sleep elixir shot at night, helps you sleep, helps you wake up. I like the one in the morning. You have it with your coffee. It doesn't replace the coffee, a little time released caffeine, hits well throughout the day, tastes good. No jitters, no like weird, like yucky taste. Great ingredients. Organically grown mushrooms from California, nano encapsulation technology. I've been on it for, I don't know, 6-7 months, and I remain a very big fan. And as the month comes to a close and we get into the early part of February, all of our listeners get 45% off the Magic Mind bundle with the link in the bio, which is magicmind.com/JetsGen. Make sure to check that out. That is 45% off the Magic Mind bundle with the mental performance shot, the support for the sleep at night at magicmind.com/JetsGen. Let's talk offensive line here. For the first time in a while, I think that this is not a situation that feels like an unmitigated disaster. I feel like for so many seasons in a row, the Jets would go into the offseason and it would be, we got to fill 2 spots, we got to fill 3 spots. Like there's all these questions. That is clearly, not the case going into this year. There certainly is some work that could be done. You could debate 1 or 2 things, but we know 4 things are very much in place and very solid. We know Olu Fashanu is going to be their starting left tackle. I think from what we saw last year, looked every bit of the first rounder that the Jets drafted, a guy that we all have very high expectations for, a guy that in a perfect world sort of turns into the next D'Brickashaw Ferguson. That's a hell of a burden to carry here if you play for the Jets. But at a minimum, a second-year player you're going to be incredibly excited about and has really good upside, Pro Bowl, All-Pro upside, and is going to be your starting left tackle. We know it's center. You're going to have Joe Tippmann, former second-round pick, going into his 3rd year. One of the best stories for the Jets last year, goes into the radar when you have such a bad season as the Jets did. But Tippmann, after all the concerns about his snapping in the summer, going to bring Connor McGovern back, and Tippmann was excellent, start to finish, and looks like a really good second-round pick, which are hard to come by for the Jets, has really settled in to that center role. So you got a young center, you got a young left tackle that you feel good about. You look at the guards, you got AVT, who is going to play out on his current deal. I think he was pretty good last year. Didn't quite look the part of a guy we hope could be a Pro Bowler or All-Pro, but will now have another year under his belt of being healthy. He's not coming back from a season-ending injury. I would expect if he continues to stay healthy, this should be his best season. He's settled into one position. He's not being moved all over the place. And again, not battling back from some devastating year-end injury. A good player who I think with whatever schematic changes come for the Jets, away from whatever the hell the version of Hackett, Downing, and Rodgers with heavy input was doing, I think will make more of an impact in the run game. You have John Simpson, who was a great free agent signing for the Jets. I think he was coming off one really good year as a starter with the Ravens, and there were some questions. Is that, a one-year wonder? Is he going to regress to the mean? And it turned out he was just a really nice upgrade over Laken Tomlinson and kind of lived past his Wario Laken resume. Brings a little toughness to the front line. Was just very good and steady from week 1 all the way through. So you got Simpson. You know you got AVT. You know you got Tippmann. You know you got Fashanu. Nice to have 4 of the 5 boxes checked. I would argue that the Jets are okay bringing Morgan Moses back on a 1-year deal. I think he's tough as hell. I think when he was out there, was pretty good last year. I think he'll have an offseason to get healthy. I think he's a critical veteran leader to have in the locker room. I think the Jets really need more players like that dude around. And I think if you could get another year out of him as your right tackle, that's a really intriguing thing. Now, Will Campbell will be a popular mock draft pick for the Jets. So will maybe a couple other tackles. Do they just draft another first round offensive lineman and put them there? Or do they do what maybe more normal teams do and find starting linemen and starting tackles on day 2 or day 3? TBD. I think you're fine with Moses as one more year. And I like the thought of bringing back the same starting 5. I think that could lead to this unit being really strong. And Moses is a guy who will be a key veteran leader in that locker room. And I just remain staggered at the amount of injuries he was able to play through at a high level last year, or a relatively high level. I just wouldn't be surprised at all to see him back as the right tackle. That does not mean that in the middle rounds, the late rounds of the draft, or even in free agency, the Jets shouldn't be poking around to better clean up their depth. Max Mitchell, Carter Warren, old regime, not going to cut it. You got to do better with your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks and finding guys who can be true developmental players and be your future right tackle, right? To play with Fashanu long term. They got to do better there. Same on the interior. The counting on Wes Schweitzer, who's literally hurt every single year, can't be doing that. Xavier Newman, it's like they got to get better at their backup spots. And easier said than done. You can only have so many good offensive linemen, right? But it's definitely a season where you're taking a day 2 and day 3 swing to round out some of these depth spots. And we kind of stop lying to ourselves that Carter Warren or Max Mitchell or Wes Schweitzer are ever going to be the answer for any amount of time. So I do think if it's not the first round, you'll see the Jets make some picks on the offensive line at some point. And I just hope they could do better with the middle. This has been a long-standing problem for the Jets, right? It's not just Max Mitchell. It's not just Carter Warren. It's like while he was here, it's like Dakota Dozier. It's Jarvis Harrison. It's all these guys they keep throwing these mid-round swings at that just never really pan out to doing anything for them on the offensive line. Cam Clark. I think the list kind of goes on where they've struggled with these rounds and they just can't figure it out in terms of getting meaningful depth there. But I think the headline for the offensive line for whoever's playing quarterback and whoever's playing running back, likely to be Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis, you got talent up front and young talent like Fashion, who's young, Tippmann's young, AVT is still relatively young, Simpson isn't old. And if they have to have one older guy with Moses, that's okay. And then you get some younger depth through the NFL draft. And maybe they poke around for some backups in the free agent market, lower cost. But this is not sort of the standard Jets offensive line offseason overhaul that I feel like they have had to do. So it took Joe Douglas, who's not the GM anymore, as he shouldn't be, 6 years to do this. But ultimately they got there on the winding road where the line is not perfect, but it's at a worst case scenario is probably middle of the road going into next year. Now, the real swing and X factors are going to be, can AVT, another year removed from a serious injury, play the part of a first rounder, play the part of a borderline Pro Bowl player, especially just locked into one position? Is there any regression to the mean coming for Simpson? How does he look in a new scheme and a new system? Olu, he's coming off a relatively serious injury. Is he going to have that year 2 leap that we saw on the other side of the ball from guys like Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald? The talent is there for an Olu, a Tippmann, and an AVT to be like Pro Bowl players if everything goes right. Just got to stay healthy. And the Jets got to be better running the football. Some of that was on the running back. Some of that was on the quarterback. Some of that was in the play calling and the overall scheme. it's just something that has to get better. The pass pro was actually, I think, pretty damn good last year. And anytime we were dealing with sack issues, I think it was more of a Rodgers thing and holding the ball too long than like their offensive line getting blown off the ball and beat up. When they were healthy, they were holding up pretty damn well. So uh, I'm sure, again, that Campbell and maybe some other tackles are going to be popular picks for the Jets at 7, whether it's they're going to stay put, trade down. It's, I don't know. I think they're more likely to go defensive line in round 1 than offensive line. And my guess is there's going to be a big push in that building to find a way to keep Morgan Moses around on very reasonable money for another year. And it is just good to not likely have to do the whole like Ryan Khalil, Dwayne Brown, last second scramble for a starting offensive lineman. I think, Bowers was fun to watch last year. I'm a strong believer in needing a dynamic tight end to compete in today's NFL. I'm intrigued by Warren at 7. I know some people really recoil at that. I don't. I think he's really worth considering there. But last year, in the vacuum of Olu over Bowers, I don't think that's one that's going to eat at Jet fans. I think Olu is just going to be a really good left tackle for a really long time. I'm not saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but I think he could be a DeBrickashaw, Ferguson-ish level player from a consistency standpoint. It was very, very much a bummer to see him get banged up late last season, and you hope he's back at 100% because the early signs were really good, like really, really good. And I understand Jet fans sort of like reticence and hesitancy here with like, well, we were all excited about Mekhi Becton after year 1. We were all excited about, remember going back a little further, Brandon Shell after year 1, after a few games. Shell actually like moved on to be like okay in some other places, but didn't happen with the Jets. The Becton stuff, you're going to read a lot of things Super Bowl week, and I'm happy for the guy. I'm glad he's settled in and he's doing well. He was very adamant while he was here that he was playing left tackle and not any other spot. And then he went to the Eagles and decided to play guard. And surrounded by all that talent, it's looked pretty damn good, especially with Saquon and Hurts. So happy for him. But I don't think this is one of those ones where it's like, it's the Jets. They blew it. It's like, no, like we watched Becton play tackle here, and it was not pretty. And he was insistent on playing tackle. I am happy that Fashanu is the left tackle of the future. We'll see if they could find the right tackle of the future. If it's not in round 1, could they do it in round 3? Could they do it in round 4? Could we just do it one of these years and find a starting offensive lineman who is good on day 2 or day 3? It would be so nice and make everything so much easier. And then you could go with a Mason Graham or a McMillan at 7. Maybe corner. I don't think so, though. I feel like it's going to be in the trenches most likely. But let's see how it shakes out. So that is the state of your Jet offensive line. We've talked Garrett, we've talked Brees, we've talked offensive line. We'll talk defensive line next week. I expect a very full week of content. We're getting really close to Streets of Fire dropping, 6-episode docuseries about the Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh era. We got them all in the can. They're going to start hitting February 10th for War Room only. So make sure you upgrade. They're, all somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour and 20 minutes, all have multiple interviews. It's not just Connor and myself. We got some new voices and some familiar friends in there. Also, Badlands, TOJ.com live show tickets. We're at like almost 200 now. So come join the party. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a packed house of Discord folk, Jet fans, all of us at Badlands. I'm fired up about it. And fired up about this Jets offensive line. If there was a jersey I'd tell you to buy right now of a current player that's a safe bet, I was a receiver. I always want the Garrett Wilson jersey, but I'm not naive enough to say there's not like a 10 to 20% chance he could get traded. I hope that's not the case. I do hope he's here, of course. But Fashanu is not a crazy bet. Let's normalize buying offensive line jerseys. I know the numbers, aren't the sexiest thing in the world, but let's get some big guy jerseys flowing out there. So it's nice to record an offensive line podcast and be like, I feel good about Fashanu. I feel good about Tippmann. I still feel good about AVT. I feel good about John Simpson. And Simpson and Moses bring some like nasty energy to the front, which they need still, whoever the quarterback is going to be. So happy Sunday. No football on today. It's very weird. We'll be back to the Super Bowl next Sunday, which will be nice. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will talk to you soon.